This time on GeekPod Blue.
Warning, station is now code blue.
Hello and welcome to this edition of GeekPod Blue. I am your host Hugh, and I have always wanted to say, it's alive! And I can only be referring to that holiday tradition and wonderful gastronomical delight known as the turducken. It is the Frankenstein of all recipes, the Frankenstein of meats. And if you don't know what a turducken is, you're about to get a very interesting lesson. Now, a turducken is basically a chicken stuffed inside a duck, stuffed inside a turkey, and then roasted. Now, these are all deboned. Sometimes they put stuffing in between the layers, and we call it a turducken. Now, this is something that is not known, or I should say not specific to the United States. It's also known as a three-bird roast. In England, they do it with a goose instead of a turkey, and they call it the gooducken or gooducken. Gooducken. Turducken, gooducken. Anyway, this is something called a portmanteau of turkey, duck, and chicken, and it's a form of something called engastration. It's a recipe method where one animal is stuffed inside the gastric passage of another. Now, reports of engastration go all the way back to the Middle Ages, if not earlier. Now, this might have, began with something called the cockatrice. Now, this monstrosity was actually made by stitching together the head and upper body of a pig with a bird, a capon, and it was found on the feast menus starting around the 15th century, dating back to the Roman Empire. The fictional Satricon featured the possibly also fictional, we don't know if this was true, but the Trojan boar, a 1,000-pound hog stuffed with wild birds. Now, this didn't really reach its heyday until the 18th and 19th centuries, when putting one meat inside of another was a way that you would show off your wealth and you would impress guests that you invited to your house. One of the most infamous versions of this engastration was published in 1807 by someone by the name of Alexander Balthazar Laurent Grammaud de la Reynière. Jesus fucking, why? Why do you need that many names? Now, in what is considered the world's very, very first food journal, the Almanach des Gourmands, he gave the recipe for the rôti sans péril, the roast without equal. Now, hold on, let me get that recipe up here because it is quite long. Now, this was basically 17 birds. It was a bustard stuffed with a turkey, a goose, a pheasant, a chicken, a duck, a guinea fowl, a teal, a woodcock, a partridge, a plover, a lapwing, a quail, a thrush, a lark, an ortolan bunting, and a garden warbler. Now, the final one, the garden warbler, was so small that it could just hold an olive. And this was definitely, the strangest thing I've probably ever heard. 17 birds stuffed inside each other. That's just bizarre. Another early form of the recipe was something called Pandora's cushion, which was a goose stuffed with a chicken and then a quail. Pandora's cushion. I would have thought that was something else entirely. There's also something called the Yorkshire Christmas pie, which is a combination of turkey, goose, pheasants, partridges, woodcock, snipe, grouse, and widgeons. Not to mention bacon, ham, truffles, and, I shit you not, calves' feet, wrapped in a crust and baked. Now, this was served at Windsor Castle in 1858, but that's not the only place you're going to find, engastration. This is something all over the world. In Greenland, the Inuits there eat something called a kiviak. Now, this is a traditional winter dish that basically takes a Greenland seal stuffed with 400 to 500 birds. It's then fermented outdoors under a pile of rocks for anywhere from 3 to 18 months and then eaten raw. Ew. The Guinness Book of World Records gave the title of largest meal to the so-called Bedouin wedding feast, a whole camel stuffed with lamb, 20 chickens stuffed with more eggs, nuts, and spices. Oh, hold on, and there's my phone.
Text from Paul, text from Paul. Everybody loves to get a text from Paul. Text from Paul, text from Paul. Everybody loves to get a text from Paul. Show wins.
Let's see what Paul has to say. He says, on the 9th day of Christmas, my Hugh friend gave to me 9 little coupons from Halloween, good for a small French fry at McDonald's. That is a great gift idea. I'm kind of jealous I didn't think of that myself.
Text from Paul, text from Paul. Everybody loves to get a text from Paul. Text from Paul, text from Paul. Everybody loves to get a text from Paul. Show wins.
Now, the turducken, nobody knows exactly where it came from, but one person claims to have actually created the turducken, and this was Chef Paul Prudhomme. Now, if you don't know who he is, Paul Prudhomme was a chef out of New Orleans. He was a Louisiana chef, and in 1979 he opened his first restaurant with his wife called K. Paul's Louisiana Kitchen. Now, this was in the French Quarter of New Orleans, and it definitely was kind of a success. It wasn't open super long, but he continued to make his name. He operated the restaurant while working at another one called the Commander's Palace, but his new restaurant was doing so well that he moved to work there full time and actually appointed Emeril Lagasse to take over as executive chef at Commander's Palace. So you can imagine, this is a guy that chose Emeril Lagasse to replace him. He's a pretty big deal, but I don't think his name is quite as known unless you're fond of looking at the spices in the spice aisle at the store, and you will see that Paul Prudhomme's magic seasoning is really a thing. I have used it, and it is delicious. Now, in 1980, he was made a Knight of the French Order in honor of his work with Cajun and Creole cuisines. His big rise to fame came with his cookbook in 1984 called Paul Prudhomme's Louisiana Kitchen. This book was given a Culinary Classic Book Award in '89 by the International Association of Culinary Professionals, and he certainly is credited with making Cajun cuisine popular, specifically things like blackened fish, things that really people, in the rest of America weren't really eating because we weren't really familiar with it. He kind of went out there and made Cajun food the big deal that it is now. Now, this potential creator of the turducken, like we said, no, we're not sure if he really created it, but he certainly did patent the word and copyrighted it. So he's the one that came up with the name turducken. He also led a very interesting life. In 1992, he was charged with possession of a weapon while trying to board a plane in the Baltimore-Washington airport. Now, he had left a loaded revolver in his carry-on luggage, which even back then is not a thing you want to do. Now, later on, he said that he had forgotten that he left it in his bag. Nobody thought that there was anything actually nefarious going on. He continued on with his career. In 2004, he traveled to Guantanamo Bay Naval Base in Cuba and brought 4,000 pounds of food and seasoning to cook for the troops stationed there. And after Hurricane Katrina, he was forced to close his restaurant. So during those restoration efforts, he cooked for free at the relief centers. Now, I think that's pretty cool. A famous chef going to cook for the troops, closing his restaurant and cooking for the victims and people who were having to deal with such a horrible, horrible disaster. Now, he launched a bunch of different cooking products, but the big one was the Chef Paul Prudhomme Magic Seasoning Blends, and they're still available today. Unfortunately, he's not with us anymore. He did die in New Orleans on October 8th after a short illness. What I thought was very interesting, in March of 2008, he was actually grazed by a .22 caliber stray bullet while he was catering the Zurich Classic of New Orleans golf tournament. Now, at first he thought a bee had stung his arm, didn't think he needed any serious medical attention, and within 5 minutes, he was back to cooking for the golf tournament. They think that it might have been caused by a falling bullet, people firing guns up into the sky. And that's a pretty badass guy. He gets grazed by a bullet. It's like, nope, I'm going to keep cooking. I got this. But we've gotten a little off track here. This was all about the turducken. And the turducken is definitely the most famous form of engastration. Now, Paul Prudhomme, his thoughts on the dish are forever going to be associated with a CNN interview he did. He was talking to Anderson Cooper in 2008, and he was asked what it's like to taste turducken. And Prudhomme said, can you imagine how it would feel to have your fantasy girlfriend in front of you, and you're just going to get your first kiss? That's the way it feels. I think it's a little creepy because if I did have my fantasy girlfriend in front of me and I was about to get my first kiss, I wouldn't be wondering if she was stuffed with my second and third picks, which is what a turducken really is like. But hey, that's just my thoughts on this situation. If you guys get a chance to have a turducken this holiday season, I hope you get to enjoy it. I'm going to talk to you guys next time. Till then, tuck and roll, kids.
GeekPod Blue is a GeekPod Network production. Executive producers Paul Showens and Hugh Allen. Concept created by Paul Showens and Hugh Allen. Intro is Opportunity by Jamus Breed. Closing is Bucket by Jamus Breed. Both licensed for use by Dennis Johnston. Want to help the show? Leave a 5-star rating on iTunes. GeekPod can be reached at contribute@geekpod.com or send us a tweet at GeekPod. That's G33kpod. You can also find GeekPod on Facebook and Instagram. G33kpod. That's G33kpod.